"Let her go, we're not paying for the surgery," my father told the doctor as I lay in a coma. He signed the "Do not resuscitate" order to save money, not realizing my lawyer was in the room, recording everything. When I woke up, I said nothing. I did something far worse and left him bankrupt in 24 hours. Can you imagine lying in a coma, barely clinging to life, only to find out your own father signed papers allowing you to die, not for mercy, but for money? My father, the CEO of a billion-dollar medical empire, tried to trade my life for a $15 million inheritance. But he made one critical mistake. He didn't know my lawyer was in the room, recording every chilling word. And when I woke up, I didn't just confront him. I orchestrated the complete and utter destruction of everything he thought he built in exactly 24 hours. Let me take you back 3 months before that crash, to a day that feels like a lifetime ago. I was sitting at the colossal mahogany conference table in my father's opulent office, the kind of place that screams power. He didn't even look up from his phone as he slid yet another form across to me. It was for the Sullivan Foundation for Medical Innovation, a name that always tasted like ash in my mouth. "Just sign it, Fiona," he mumbled. "It's a simple tax write-off. Everyone does it." But I'd spent a decade as a legal director. I knew money laundering when I saw it, even when it was dressed in a bespoke suit and shared my last name. "I can't sign this, Dad," I told him, my voice firm despite the tremor inside. "These transactions don't match any legitimate medical research. It's not right." That's when he said the words that would echo in my ears for years, the words that defined our twisted relationship. "You're too soft for this business." Your mother was the same way. Weak. My mother. The woman who built the pharmaceutical empire that funded his entire lavish life, only to be taken by cancer when I was 22. She had left me $15 million in a trust fund, safely locked away until I turned 35. Unless, of course, I became medically incapacitated. Funny, isn't it? How specific legal clauses can feel like prophecies. Family dinners became battlegrounds, each meal an interrogation. "Why won't you support the family business? Don't you understand loyalty?" My brother, James, the CFO, would sit there, silent, drowning his conscience in another glass of expensive whiskey while my father branded me the family traitor. They thought my integrity was weakness. They mistook my refusal to break the law for an inability to understand their schemes. They truly believed that because I wouldn't cross legal lines, I couldn't see them being crossed. My mother's trust fund, that $15 million, was untouchable until my 35th birthday, unless I became medically incapacitated. That clause, it was like a dark whisper of what was to come. You have to understand the empire Robert Sullivan commanded. Sullivan Medical Group wasn't just a network of hospitals, it was a healthcare kingdom. 12 hospitals, 3,000 doctors, annual revenue north of $2.8 billion. My father was untouchable. He sat on 9 boards, controlled the voting shares. He was New England medicine. And his crown jewel? A $500 million merger with Hartford Healthcare Systems. This deal would make him the most powerful man in the region, a god among men. The grand announcement was set for March 26th at the annual shareholders' meeting, a glittering affair at the Four Seasons Boston. 200 of the most influential investors would gather to witness his ultimate triumph. Despite the constant humiliation, I stayed. I remained the legal director, which meant I had access to everything, every contract, every secret subsidiary, every board resolution. People often asked why. Why did I put myself through his daily dismissals? His public jabs? "She's only here because of nepotism," he'd sneer to investors during facility tours, as I stood just feet away. Good thing she inherited her mother's money, because she certainly didn't inherit any business acumen. The word stung, but I stayed. Because someone had to document what was happening. Someone had to be the adult in a room full of entitled children playing with people's lives. I knew the Sullivan Foundation alone had diverted $40 million in 5 years. The paper trail was elaborate, brilliant, and almost untraceable. But I knew that merger was his coronation. His Super Bowl. His ultimate validation that he had finally, definitively surpassed my mother's legacy. He had no idea it was about to become his public execution. March 15, 2024. 8:30 p.m. I was driving home on I-93, exhausted after another 16-hour day cleaning up one of my father's aggressive contract negotiations. The rain had just started, that cold, indecisive March rain that can't quite commit to being snow. I remember the blinding flash of an 18-wheeler's headlights. They swung directly into my lane. 2 seconds. That's all I had. 2 seconds to realize my life was about to fundamentally change. The impact was deafening. My Audi became a metal top, spinning, flipping 3 times before slamming into the median barrier. The dashboard camera from the car behind me caught every terrifying second. Later, it would clear my name when my father's lawyers tried to suggest it was all some elaborate insurance fraud. First responders found me unconscious, blood pooling from a severe head wound. Glasgow Coma scale, a terrifying 6 out of 15. Severe traumatic brain injury. They airlifted me to Massachusetts General Hospital, the flagship, the crown jewel of my father's network. The bitter irony was not lost on anyone. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the brilliant head of neurology, would later testify that my prognosis was actually quite optimistic. A 70% chance of full recovery, she'd meticulously noted. Asterisk strong neurological responses. Recommend aggressive treatment. Asterisk, but that's not what my father heard. Not when he finally bothered to show up, for agonizing hours later. For hours. It was a 20-minute drive, but he stopped to call his lawyers, his insurance team, then board members to assure them his merger wouldn't be affected by my unfortunate accident. When he finally strode into my ICU room, he didn't ask about my pain. He didn't ask about my chances. Instead, he grilled Dr. Martinez 3 separate times about a persistent vegetative state, about whether my medical power of attorney documents were properly executed. He was already calculating, already eyeing that trust fund. While machines kept my body breathing, while my brain fought for its very life, Robert Sullivan was coldly calculating the value of his daughter's death. The accident? That wasn't the betrayal. The accident was simply the opportunity he'd been waiting for. What my father didn't know, couldn't possibly have known, was that Marcus Smith was already there. Marcus had been my personal attorney for a decade, my confidant, my shadow when I started digging into my father's questionable dealings. He wasn't just my lawyer, he was my insurance policy. 3 years prior, I'd signed a comprehensive medical advocacy document, giving him the explicit right to be present during any medical decisions should I ever become incapacitated. It was meticulously filed, buried deep within a stack of mundane estate planning papers with the Massachusetts State Bar. My father, in all his arrogance, never even knew it existed. Marcus got the call from the hospital at 8:47 p.m., 17 minutes after the crash. Unlike my father, he didn't hesitate. He came immediately. While Robert was still on his first board conference call, Marcus was already in my ICU room, briefcase in hand. Inside that briefcase? A small, digital recording device. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state, but there are exceptions for emergency situations with prior written consent. I had given Marcus that consent 3 years ago. Notarized. Filed. Yet another piece of paper my father never, ever saw coming. I positioned myself in the corner of the room, Marcus would later tell the court. He identified himself to the medical staff as Fiona Sullivan's legal advocate, documentation in hand. No one batted an eye. In the high-stakes world of Sullivan Medical, lawyers in ICU rooms were as commonplace as heart monitors. For 4 hours, he sat, waiting, watching the machines breathe for me, reading my charts, speaking quietly with Dr. Martinez about my prognosis, recording everything. The nurses, I later learned, liked him. Dr. Martinez would recall that he asked about my comfort, about pain management. He cared about me, the patient, not just the paperwork. Marcus knew. We had discussed this scenario, joked about it even over coffee countless times. If something happens to me, my father will come for the money. Marcus wasn't joking now. He was documenting. Robert Sullivan finally entered my ICU room at 12:43 a.m. He didn't walk, he strode, like he was entering a boardroom. Armani suit still immaculately pressed. 2 lawyers flanking him, Mitchell Barnes, his corporate shark, and a specialist in estate law, David Cross. Status report. That's all he said to Dr. Martinez. Not, how is she? Not, will she be okay? Just status report. Dr. Martinez, commendably, kept her composure. Your daughter has significant head trauma, Mr. Sullivan, but her neurological responses are encouraging. Percentage chance of full recovery, he cut her off. Approximately 70%, with aggressive treatment. And without aggressive treatment? The doctor paused, clearly perplexed. Mr. Sullivan, I don't understand. It's a simple question, he snapped. What happens if we pursue comfort care only? Marcus pressed record. For the next 20 minutes, my father interrogated her. Brain death criteria. Vegetative states. The cold, hard cost of every treatment protocol. He asked about my brain function 3 times. Not once about my pain. He pulled out his phone, calculating insurance deductibles, while I lay there, unhearing, unseen, but still somehow, stubbornly, fighting. She has excellent insurance, Dr. Martinez offered. The experimental treatments would be largely covered. That's not the point, Robert dismissed her, turning to Kraus. Pull up the trust documents. They huddled, discussing my mother's $15 million trust fund as if I were already dead. 15 million, they whispered. Think how many others that could benefit through the Sullivan Foundation. Kraus confirmed. The trust passes to her father if she dies without children or a spouse. But only if she's deceased, he added. Permanent incapacitation maintains her as beneficiary. That's when Robert asked the question that would seal his fate. What if she's DNR? What if we decide not to resuscitate if she crashes? Dr. Martinez visibly stiffened. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter is stable. There is no medical indication for a DNR order. I'm her father, he retorted. I have medical power of attorney. Actually, Marcus said quietly from the corner. It was the first time he'd spoken. You don't. The room went dead silent. My father finally turned, his eyes narrowing to slits as he took in Marcus. Who the hell are you? Marcus Smith. Miss Sullivan's personal attorney and designated medical advocate. He held up the documentation, filed with the state 3 years prior. I have equal authority in medical decisions while she's incapacitated. That's impossible. I'm her father. I'm her designated advocate. Would you like to see the paperwork? Robert's face flushed a furious red. Mitchell Barnes whispered urgently, but Robert waved him off. It doesn't matter. As her father, my wishes should be considered. Of course, Marcus said, his voice utterly calm. Please continue your discussion with Dr. Martinez. I'm just here to observe, and to ensure Fiona's interests are protected. What followed was 23 minutes of recorded evidence. 23 minutes that would later be played for a room full of shareholders. 23 minutes of my father stripping away every pretense and revealing exactly who he was. Look, Doctor, Robert said, his tone shifting, becoming the ruthless voice he reserved for hostile takeovers. My daughter wouldn't want to live as a vegetable. She's told me many times she values quality of life over quantity. She's not in a vegetative state. Dr. Martinez insisted, her voice rising. Her brain activity shows, but she could be tomorrow. Next week. These things deteriorate, don't they? He pulled out his phone, showing her something. I've been reading about similar cases. Families bankrupted by false hope. Millions spent keeping bodies alive when the person is already gone. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter has a 70% chance. Let her go peacefully. The words hung in the air, a cold, calculated death sentence. We won't pay for experimental treatments when that money could save the hospital. Think about it. $15 million. Do you know how many pediatric cancer patients that could help? How many families without insurance? Dr. Martinez looked utterly disgusted. Are you seriously suggesting? I'm suggesting we be practical. Realistic. My daughter was always practical. He turned to Kraus. Draw up the DNR paperwork. The doctor needs to sign off on it. No, Dr. Martinez said, her voice firm. I won't sign anything. There's no medical justification. Robert smiled. That chilling boardroom smile I'd seen destroy countless careers. You're right. You won't sign it. But Dr. Harrison will. He's arriving in an hour. Dr. Harrison, Robert's golf buddy. The man quietly removed from 2 hospitals for ethics violations before my father gave him a safe landing at Sullivan Medical. This is medical murder, Dr. Martinez whispered, horrified. This is mercy, Robert replied, signing the DNR order that Dr. Harrison would later rubber stamp. Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. Marcus captured every single damning word. As Robert finished signing, James arrived. My brother. Always the conflicted one. Smart enough to see our father for what he was, yet weak enough to always crave his approval. Dad, he asked, his voice strained, taking in the scene, the lawyers, the documents, our father's signature on what was essentially my death warrant. What's happening? We're making the hard decisions, Robert said, not even looking up. Someone has to. James moved to my bedside. And he touched my hand. The first person in that room to actually acknowledge me, to touch me as if I were still human. The nurses said she's responding well, he murmured. The nurses aren't doctors. Dad, maybe we should wait. Robert's head snapped up, his face a mask of cold fury. Wait for what? For her to deteriorate? For the merger to fall apart because the board thinks I can't handle a family crisis. He stalked closer to James. You want to keep your position, don't you? CFO of the new merged entity. I couldn't see James's face then, but Marcus described it later. It was the exact moment my brother chose his corner office over his sister. She did say once that she wouldn't want to be kept alive artificially, James said quietly. The lie so easy. I'd never said that. In fact, I'd said the exact opposite in one of our rare, honest moments. See? Robert crowed to Dr. Martinez. Even her brother agrees. But James wasn't finished wrestling with his conscience. The trust fund, though. Mom wanted Fiona to have it. Your mother's dead, Robert said flatly. And that money could save the company from the Hartford investigation. Hartford investigation, that was new. Marcus made a note. James signed as a witness to the DNR. Later, he'd tell me he'd convinced himself it was temporary. That I'd wake up before anything truly awful happened. He'd borrowed $2 million from me just 6 months earlier, money I'd given him to save his house from foreclosure. Some betrayals are paid with 30 pieces of silver. Mine cost $2 million and a CFO title. March 18, 2024. 5:47 a.m. I opened my eyes. Fluorescent lights. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. The first face I saw was Dr. Martinez's. She gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Don't try to speak, she whispered, you're intubated. Just squeeze my hand if you understand. I squeezed. The next few hours were a blur of tests, scans, and barely contained medical excitement. Miraculous recovery, they kept saying. Better than expected neurological function. Dr. Martinez couldn't hide her profound relief, or her quiet fury at what had almost been. Marcus arrived at noon, after the tubes were finally removed and I could speak, albeit in a hoarse whisper. He closed the door, pulled out his phone, and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. Asterisk, let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. Asterisk, I listened to all 23 minutes. I heard my father coldly calculate my worth. I heard my brother lie about my wishes. I heard them sign my life away for money and mergers. 3 independent neurologists have reviewed your charts, Marcus said quietly, his face tight. Dr. Jennifer Wu from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Michael Roberts from Cleveland Clinic, and Dr. Amanda Foster from Mayo. All 3 confirmed, you never met the medical criteria for a DNR. I've had their reports notarized. The merger, I whispered, the date flashing in my mind. 8 days away. March 26th. I tried to sit up, but the room spun violently. You need to recover, Dr. Martinez interrupted, entering with a chart. And you need to be careful. Your father's been telling everyone you have significant cognitive impairment. He's already filed for emergency guardianship. That's when the decision crystallized. I looked at Marcus, then at Dr. Martinez. Then we give him exactly what he expects. Doctor, I continued, if anyone asks about my condition. She understood immediately. Significant short-term memory loss. Confusion. Difficulty with complex reasoning. Marcus gave a grim smile. How long do you need to play impaired? 8 days, I rasped. Until the shareholders' meeting. When Robert visited that afternoon, I gave him the performance of his life. I stared at him with unfocused eyes, struggling, almost painfully, to remember his name. Dad? I ventured, like a child guessing. Are you my dad? The relief that flooded his face was obscene. Yes, sweetheart, I'm here. You've been in an accident. I don't remember, I slurred slightly, letting my words tangle. Everything's fuzzy. You've been taking care of me? Of course, princess. I've been handling everything. He pulled out guardianship documents, pressing them into my hand. You just need to rest. Don't worry about anything complicated. I feigned confusion, gazing blankly at the papers. I don't understand these words. They're all jumbled. Behind him, Dr. Martinez's jaw clenched. She knew the truth. My cognitive function was at 98%. My performance was flawless. For the next 3 days, I kept up the act. When Dr. Harrison's psychiatric evaluator arrived, I naturally failed every complex reasoning test, yet passed just enough basic ones to avoid suspicion. I knew my name, but couldn't remember the date. I recognized faces, but couldn't solve simple math. While I played the broken daughter, Marcus worked 18-hour days. Every night, after visiting hours, he'd return, our secret communication happening through a secure messaging app disguised as a meditation program on my phone. Suffolk County Courthouse has authenticated the recording, he typed. Judge Patricia Loomis signed the verification. I typed back, Hartford investigation, *SEC investigating suspicious trades before merger announcement. Your father needs this deal to cover losses. The pieces were falling into place. Robert had been using Sullivan Medical as his personal piggy bank, believing the merger would make all the evidence disappear. He needed that $15 million from my trust to close the deal. Guardianship hearing Monday. Judge Ronald Fitzgerald. Golfs with your father every Sunday, Marcus messaged. I offered a weak smile to the nurse who entered, immediately dropping my phone, my eyes wide and confused. Where am I? I whispered. Is this a hotel? She patted my hand sympathetically. Poor dear. But the moment she left, my fingers flew across the screen. Get me everything on the merger. Every document, every email. Already done. Your access codes still work. They think you're too impaired to use them. I typed my response, my gaze fixed on the ceiling. I'm sorry, Dad. I don't remember the accident. You've been taking care of everything. By the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, and believe me, it only gets more intense, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, you understand why I couldn't just confront him directly. The evidence had to be ironclad, undeniable, and the revelation had to be utterly public. March 20th, 9 a.m. sharp. Robert filed for emergency financial guardianship. The petition painted a heartbreaking portrait. Beloved daughter, brilliant mind, destroyed. Unable to manage the complex trust fund, significant cognitive impairment, requires immediate intervention to protect assets. Judge Ronald Fitzgerald, Robert's Sunday golf partner for 15 years, scheduled the hearing for March 25th, the day before the shareholders' meeting. Not a coincidence. Dr. Harrison provided an 8-page psychiatric evaluation, mostly compiled while he was on his phone for a mere 12 minutes, declaring severe executive dysfunction. But the real gut punch was in the attached financial documents. Robert had already predated the transfer paperwork for my trust fund. The $15 million was set to go directly into Sullivan Medical's Emergency Operations Fund, a slush account I'd been investigating for 2 years. He's not even trying to hide it anymore, Marcus muttered during one of his official visits, knowing our room was likely bugged. Your father's very concerned about your recovery, I replied vacantly, perfectly playing my part. I'm so grateful for his help. I just don't understand why there are so many papers. Marcus placed a folder on my bedside table, ostensibly get well cards from colleagues. Inside were notarized affidavits from 3 nurses who'd witnessed my perfectly coherent conversations when Robert wasn't around, each stating they'd been pressured by administration to support the family's assessment. That evening, Robert brought in Dr. Patricia Henley, a rare breed, a psychiatric specialist with actual ethics. She spent 2 hours running legitimate tests. I failed them all, spectacularly. But I saw her frown, comparing my scattered answers to my brain scans. The neurological activity doesn't match the behavioral presentation, she told Robert carefully. Head injuries are unpredictable, he dismissed her. Surely you've seen cases where the scans look better than the reality. She had, but she also requested my previous medical records. Marcus had already ensured she received them, including my perfect cognitive assessments from my annual executive physical just 6 months prior. While I played the broken daughter, Marcus built our case with surgical precision. The ICU recording was just the terrifying beginning. By March 22nd, we had a 47-page medical file that would shred any claim my DNR was medically justified. Dr. Jennifer Wu from Johns Hopkins wrote, "Patient shows no indication meeting criteria for withdrawal of care. Glasgow Coma scale improved from 6 to 14 within 48 hours. Textbook recovery trajectory." Dr. Michael Roberts from Cleveland Clinic was blunter. The DNR order signed on March 15th appears to be motivated by factors other than patient welfare. But Dr. Amanda Foster from Mayo Clinic delivered the killing blow. In my 30-year career, I have never seen a DNR order issued for a patient with such positive neurological indicators. This represents a severe breach of medical ethics. Medical malpractice was just the appetizer. The main course? HIPAA violations. Robert had shamelessly shared my private medical information with 6 board members, 2 merger partners, and 3 investors, all to reassure them that my crisis wouldn't disrupt his business. Each unauthorized disclosure carried a $50,000 fine, but more importantly, each one screamed that he viewed my medical emergency as nothing more than a business opportunity. Marcus had every single document notarized. Judge Patricia Loomis, completely independent of Robert's country club network, personally verified the ICU recording's authenticity. "This is prosecutable," she told Marcus off the record. "Criminal, not just civil." The FBI was already taking interest. Those suspicious trades before the merger announcement? Traced back to accounts linked to the Sullivan Foundation. Robert had been insider trading with charity funds, betting the merger would cover his tracks. My $15 million trust? That was meant to replace what he'd stolen. Then we found it. Article 7, Section 3 of the Sullivan Medical Bylaws. Any executive found guilty of medical malpractice or significant breach of fiduciary duty shall be removed within 24 hours of board determination. A 2/3 vote. With 9 board members, we needed 6. Marcus had quietly reached out to 3 independent members, Dr. Elizabeth Chang, Professor Michael Torres, and Sandra Williams. They were already weary of Robert's aggressive tactics. They agreed to review our evidence before the shareholders' meeting. Each HIPAA violation was a $50,000 fine, but that was a drop in the ocean compared to the tsunami that was coming. By March 23rd, we had everything. Medical evidence, legal documentation, financial proof of embezzlement, and a room full of witnesses, all set to gather in 3 days. The shareholders' meeting, March 26th, 2 p.m. Four Seasons Boston Grand Ballroom. 200 of healthcare's most powerful investors gathered to witness what Robert called the deal of the decade. Hartford Healthcare Systems was buying a 60% stake in Sullivan Medical for $500 million, creating the largest network in New England. Robert's presentation deck was 90 slides of pure, unadulterated triumph. He'd been rehearsing his 45-minute speech for weeks. The Wall Street Journal, Boston Globe, Bloomberg, all confirmed attendance. This wasn't just a business deal, it was Robert's coronation as the undisputed king of New England medicine. What none of those attendees knew, however, was that the SEC had opened a formal investigation 3 days earlier. Marcus's suspicious trades? Just the tip of the iceberg. Hartford's own due diligence team was starting to ask incredibly uncomfortable questions about the Sullivan Foundation's financials. On March 24th, I made my calculated move. I called Robert from my hospital bed, my voice weak, confused. "Daddy? The nice lawyer man says there's an important meeting tomorrow. Something about pay. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I'll handle everything at the guardianship hearing." "Oh, okay. Will you be having another meeting? You always have such important meetings." He chuckled. That patronizing, self-satisfied laugh I'd heard my entire life. "Yes, princess. Tuesday is Daddy's big day. The biggest deal ever. Can I come?" I asked, putting all my energy into sounding fragile and earnest. "I want to see you be important." There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning, the calculation in his voice. "Of course, you can come, sweetheart. Everyone should see you're being well cared for. Sit in the front row and support your family." Perfect. He wanted me there. A prop. The tragically impaired daughter whose medical crisis he was nobly managing. The optics would be flawless. The devoted father, the corporate titan, effortlessly delivering victory despite personal tragedy. Marcus filed the paperwork for my attendance as therapeutic reintegration into familiar environments. Dr. Martinez supported it with a note about positive stimulation for recovery. This merger would be his crowning achievement, he thought. The invitation list read like a who's who of healthcare power brokers. Everyone who mattered would be there. They'd witness something, all right. March 25th, 10 a.m. While Robert clinked champagne glasses at the Ritz-Carlton bar, celebrating his successful guardianship hearing, I sat in my hospital room with Marcus, signing the most important documents of my life. Judge Fitzgerald, just as expected, had granted Robert full financial guardianship. But we had anticipated this. Marcus had filed an emergency appeal with the state Supreme Court 90 minutes before the hearing, citing judicial conflict of interest. The appeal wouldn't be heard for 72 hours, long after the shareholders' meeting. "Your father's already initiated the trust fund transfer," Marcus said, showing me his laptop. $15 million scheduled to move at 9 a.m. tomorrow. "Let it happen," I said, my hand steady as I signed my name to a document titled Refusal of Guardianship, Mental Competency Declaration. A notary public, carefully chosen for her complete independence from Sullivan Medical, witnessed and sealed it. We had also sent encrypted emails to our 3 sympathetic board members. "Please attend tomorrow's meeting with an open mind. Documentation of critical compliance failures will be presented." Dr. Elizabeth Chang replied within the hour, "I'll be there." Professor Michael Torres, concerned by recent patterns, "Will attend." Sandra Williams, "About time someone spoke up." 3 guaranteed. We needed 3 more for the 2/3 majority. Robert called me at 11 p.m., slurring slightly, drunk on his own success. "Tomorrow, princess, everything changes. Your mother never understood vision. She just hoarded money. But I'm going to build something that matters." "That's nice, Daddy," I said, injecting confusion into my voice. "Will there be balloons?" He laughed. "Sure, sweetheart. All the balloons you want." After he hung up, I looked at Marcus. He just admitted to seeing my mother's. "Money as is to spend." "Recorded," Marcus confirmed, adding it to the file. Dr. Martinez stopped by at midnight with my discharge papers. "Medically cleared," she said loudly, for any listening ears. Then, quieter, her eyes glinting, "Give him hell." I didn't sleep that night. I reviewed every piece of evidence, every damning document. 47 pages of medical testimony. 23 minutes of audio. For confirmed HIPAA violations. 3 years of embezzlement documentation. Tomorrow, either I lose everything or he does. There was no middle ground. At 6 a.m. on March 26th, I put on my Navy suit, the one my mother had bought me for my first day as legal director. It was time. Time to end this. March 26th, 2 p.m. The Grand Ballroom at the Four Seasons, Boston. It was a monument to corporate power. Crystal chandeliers dripped golden light over 200 of healthcare's elite. The Hartford healthcare delegation, a phalanx of 12 executives flown in from Connecticut, occupied the entire left section. The Wall Street Journal's senior healthcare reporter was there. Bloomberg's camera crew was setting up for a live stream. I sat in the front row, wearing my navy suit, a subtly triumphant smile beneath what everyone assumed was a vacant expression. Robert had positioned me perfectly, close enough for poignant sympathy optics, far enough that I couldn't possibly disrupt anything. James, uncomfortable in his CFO finest, sat beside me, occasionally patting my hand as if I were a fragile child. "Just sit quietly," he whispered. "It'll all be over soon." He had no idea how profoundly right he was. Robert took the stage at 2:15, commanding the room with practiced authority. The presentation screen behind him proudly displayed the merged logos of Sullivan Medical Group and Hartford Healthcare, a glistening promise of the future. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we make history," he began, his voice booming. $500 million. 3,000 doctors. 12 hospitals expanding to 20. This merger isn't just business, it's a revolution in patient care. The audience applauded on cue. Board members nodded approvingly. The Hartford executives offered their practiced corporate smiles. For 35 minutes, Robert painted his masterpiece, soaring revenue projections, efficiency improvements that would transform medicine, the Sullivan Foundation's charitable work, $40 million serving communities in need. I watched him work the room, this man who had signed my death warrant for money. He mentioned my mother once, briefly, building on the pharmaceutical legacy of my late wife, before quickly moving back to his own glorious accomplishments. At minute 35, he reached his carefully rehearsed climax. "Before we sign these historic documents, I want to acknowledge my family's support through recent challenges. My daughter Fiona's recovery from her tragic accident reminds us that healthcare is personal, not just professional." 200 faces turned to me, their sympathy practiced, their cameras focused. This was his moment of perfect orchestration. The devoted father. The corporate titan. The healthcare visionary. I stood up. "Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the polite applause, clear and sharp, not a trace of the impairment I'd been faking. "I do have something to add about healthcare being personal." Robert's smile froze. "Sweetheart," he began, "you should rest." "I'm perfectly rested." I walked toward the stage, Marcus rising from his seat in the third row, a thick leather folder in his hand. "In fact, I have a medical ethics concern to raise before these documents are signed." The room went dead silent. 200 pairs of eyes pivoted to me. Robert's face flushed a dangerous red. "You're not well, sweetheart." "The accident." "I'm well enough to know what you did in that ICU room, Dad." The Wall Street Journal reporter immediately pulled out her phone. The Bloomberg camera swiveled. The show was about to begin. The transformation in the room was instant. Those practiced sympathetic smiles vanished, replaced by the sharp, predatory attention of people who smelled blood in the water. These weren't just investors. They were sharks, and they'd just detected weakness. "Security," Robert roared, but his voice cracked slightly. "My daughter is confused." "I'm not confused." I reached the stage stairs, climbing them with deliberate, precise steps. "I'm cognitively intact, legally competent, and fully aware that you signed a do not resuscitate order while I was in a coma to steal my $15 million trust fund." Gasps rippled through the audience. The Hartford delegation exchanged terrified glances. One executive was already texting frantically. "These are delusions from her head injury." Robert stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Marcus," I called out, my voice ringing clear. "The evidence, please." Marcus walked down the center aisle like a prosecutor approaching the bench, holding up the folder for everyone to see. 47 pages of medical documentation, 3 independent neurological assessments, and 23 minutes of audio recorded in the ICU at Massachusetts General Hospital. "You can't record without consent." Mitchell Barnes, Robert's lawyer, leapt to his feet. "That's illegal." "Actually," Marcus said calmly, "Miss Sullivan provided prior written consent for medical advocacy recordings 3 years ago. Notarized, filed with the state. Completely legal under Massachusetts law." I took the microphone from the podium. My father stood frozen, his mind no doubt racing, calculating his diminishing options. Asterisk run? Stay? Fight? Lie? Asterisk, before we play the recording, I said, addressing the room, let me establish the medical facts. On March 15th, I was in a car accident. Traumatic brain injury. Glasgow Coma scale of 6. By March 17th, that had improved to 14. 3 independent neurologists from Johns Hopkins, Cleveland Clinic, and Mayo have confirmed I showed a 70% chance of full recovery. I clicked the presentation remote, replacing Robert's gleaming merger slides with stark medical documents. Yet on March 15th, just 4 hours after my accident, my father signed a DNR order. The reasoning? Let me quote directly from the recording you are about to hear. Marcus connected his phone to the ballroom's sound system. The perfect acoustics carried every word. Asterisk, let her go peacefully. We won't pay for experimental treatments when that money could save the hospital. Asterisk then, clearer. Asterisk, $15 million. Do you know how many pediatric cancer patients that could help? Asterisk, and finally, the killing blow. Asterisk, the trust passes to her father if she dies without children or a spouse. Asterisk, the room erupted. Board members shot to their feet. The Hartford delegation were already making for the exits. Someone shouted, "This is medical murder." Robert lunged for the microphone, but 2 security guards, the very same ones he would have called on me, stepped forward, confused, unsure who to protect. This is taken out of context. Robert screamed over the chaos. Then let's play all 23 minutes, I said, my voice steady. Let everyone hear the full context. The Hartford team was gone by minute 37. The merger? It died at minute 38. This was the moment everything changed. Once you've gathered all your evidence, once you've chosen your battlefield, there's no turning back. The full recording played. It was a funeral dirge for Robert Sullivan's empire. Every word, every cold calculation, every casual dismissal of my life echoed through that grand ballroom. She's stable now, but these things can deteriorate, Robert's voice cut through the air. Asterisk, better to let nature take its course. Asterisk, then Dr. Martinez's voice, professional but clearly distressed. Asterisk, Mr. Sullivan, your daughter is showing remarkable neurological improvement. Asterisk, and Robert, dismissive. Asterisk, doctor, I understand medicine. I run 12 hospitals. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let go. Asterisk, the audience listened in horrified silence as my father discussed my life as if I were a line item on a balance sheet. Phones were up, recording. The Bloomberg camera captured it all. But the worst part came at minute 18. James's voice. Asterisk, Dad, maybe we should wait. Asterisk, and Robert's chilling reply. Asterisk, you want to keep your CFO position in the merged company, don't you? Then stop pretending you care. We both know you need this deal to cover your debts. Asterisk, James, in the front row, went utterly pale. His complicity was now public record. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Then, Sandra Williams from the board stood up. I move for an emergency board meeting under Article 7, Section 3 of the corporate bylaws. Seconded. Dr. Elizabeth Chong said immediately. You can't do this during a shareholders' meeting. Robert protested, desperate. Actually, we can, Professor Michael Torres stated, rising. When evidence of medical malpractice by a senior executive is presented, the board has a fiduciary duty to act immediately. The 9 board members huddled, whispering intensely. Robert stood alone at the podium, his triumphant merger presentation still glowing behind him, a monument to what would never be. This is a setup, he stammered into the microphone, appealing to the dwindling audience. My daughter is obviously being manipulated. By whom? I asked, my voice cutting through his panic. The 3 independent neurologists? The Suffolk County Court that authenticated the recording? The FBI agents investigating your insider trading through the Sullivan Foundation. That last revelation sent another shockwave. Several investors, already on their feet, scrambled for the exits, phones pressed to ears, no doubt calling their lawyers. The Wall Street Journal reporter approached me. Miss Sullivan, are you confirming FBI involvement? I'm confirming that my father tried to kill me for money, I said clearly, knowing every word would be tomorrow's headline. Everything else will come out in due course. The board reconvened. Sandra Williams spoke for them. By unanimous vote of 8-1, Mr. Sullivan voting for himself, Robert Sullivan is immediately removed as CEO of Sullivan Medical Group for gross violations of medical ethics and fiduciary duty. The lead executive from Hartford Healthcare stood up. Hartford Healthcare formally withdraws from all merger negotiations, effective immediately. By the time security escorted Robert from his own celebration, Sullivan Medical Group stock had plummeted 47%. $230 million in market cap evaporated in less than an hour. Maximum conflict. Robert cried out desperately as he was led away. "This is my company. My legacy." "No," I said quietly, watching him go. "It was built on my mother's money, and it dies with your greed." The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within 2 hours of that recording playing, Massachusetts General Hospital suspended Dr. Harrison's privileges. The medical board launched a formal inquiry. The state attorney general's office opened a criminal investigation. Robert was staring down 4 HIPAA violations, $50,000 each, just federal penalties. The state would add more. Every board member he'd illegally informed about my condition could now sue him. By 6 p.m., 8 of the 9 board members had permanently removed Robert. The 9th, Robert himself, no longer had voting rights. Marcus, ever prepared, filed the documentation with the Secretary of State the moment the vote was cast. He also filed criminal complaints with the Boston police for attempted murder through medical negligence. "The evidence is overwhelming," Detective Patricia Murphy told me that evening. "The recording alone would be enough. With the medical documentation, your father's looking at potential attempted murder charges." The FBI arrived at Sullivan Medical Group headquarters at 7 p.m. Warrant in hand. Servers, documents seized. Sullivan Foundation accounts frozen. That $40 million in charitable donations would be traced transaction by transaction. James found me in the hotel lobby, his face gray with shock and shame. "Fiona, You signed the DNR as a witness," I said simply. "You lied about my wishes. I thought you were going to die anyway." "Dad said the doctor's dad lied, James. And you chose to believe him because it was easier than standing up to him." He pulled out his phone, showing me a message. "I've already submitted my resignation as CFO. I'll testify if you need me to. About everything. The fraud. The insider trading. All of it. Your testimony won't save you from prosecution," Marcus informed him, ever the realist. "But cooperation might reduce your sentence." James nodded, looking older than his 35 years. "I know. I'm sorry, Fiona. I should have protected you." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." By market close, Sullivan Medical Group had lost 47% of its value. The board appointed Dr. Sarah Martinez as interim CEO, the very same doctor who fought my DNR. Poetic justice. Robert Sullivan's removal was complete in less than 6 hours. The Boston Globe's morning edition headline screamed, "Medical CEO's DNR scandal, attempted murder for millions." The Wall Street Journal was more subdued, but equally devastating. Sullivan Medical Group CEO removed after recording reveals attempt to hasten daughter's death for inheritance. Bloomberg's coverage, including the video from the shareholders' meeting, went viral. My clear, composed revelation starkly contrasted with Robert's desperate denials. 3 million views by noon. #DNR scandal trending nationally. Medical ethics blogs dissected every second. Legal analysts debated criminal charges on cable news. Reddit's legal advice forum had a mega thread with over 10,000 comments, many from healthcare workers sharing their own horror stories about profit-driven medical decisions. The Massachusetts Medical Board issued an unprecedented statement by noon. "The actions described in the Sullivan case represent the most egregious violation of medical ethics we have investigated. We are reviewing all DNR orders issued at Sullivan Medical Group facilities in the past 5 years. 47 cases were flagged for immediate review. 3 Sullivan medical hospitals announced they were severing their affiliation agreements. The nursing union called for a vote of no confidence. Harvard medical students started a petition to remove Robert's name from the Sullivan Auditorium, built with foundation money, of course. The FBI expanded their investigation. Insider trading was just the beginning. shell companies in the Caymans, bribes disguised as consulting fees. Nearly $30 million siphoned from the Sullivan Foundation over 7 years. Dr. Martinez, as interim CEO, held an emergency press conference at 4 p.m. Sullivan Medical Group is committed to complete transparency and ethical reform, she announced. We are cooperating fully with all investigations and implementing immediate changes to our oversight procedures. Every DNR order in our system will be reviewed by an independent panel. A reporter asked about me. Will Miss Sullivan be returning to her position as legal director? Miss Sullivan is focusing on her recovery and her own legal practice, Dr. Martinez said carefully. We respect her decision to distance herself from the organization during this transition. Distance myself? That was diplomatic. The truth was, I never wanted to set foot in a Sullivan medical building again. By market close, the stock had stabilized at 53% of its pre-scandal value. $230 million in market cap gone. Robert's personal holdings, once worth $80 million, were now frozen by federal order. By the time the news cycle ended, Robert Sullivan wasn't just ruined. He was radioactive. No hospital in America would ever hire him again. 3 days after the meeting, James came to my apartment. He looked like he hadn't slept since. He stood in my doorway, clutching a box of documents and a resignation letter already public knowledge. I hadn't invited him in. I've been thinking about Mom, he started, his voice strained. What she would think of what we became. What you and Dad became. I corrected him coldly. I never changed. No, he conceded, you didn't. He set the box down. These are all the records I kept. Off-the-books transactions, recorded conversations, emails. Dad doesn't know I saved 3 years' worth. My insurance policy, I called it. And you're giving them to me now? I asked, my voice breaking. After I almost died? His voice broke too. I should have protected you, Fiona. In that ICU room, when Dad was signing those papers, I knew it was wrong. But I was so deep in debt, so dependent on his approval, that I convinced myself my life was worth less than your debt. He finally met my eyes. Yes, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life. But I can at least try to make it right. I'll testify against him. Against the whole network of corruption. I'll take whatever sentence they give me. I truly looked at my brother then. He'd lost weight. His hands trembled slightly. The golden voice CFO was gone, replaced by a man who had finally seen himself clearly and couldn't stand the view. The $2 million I loaned you, I said. What happened to it? Gambling debts. Dad's addiction isn't substances, it's power. Mine was trying to keep up with his lifestyle. He pulled out his phone, showing me a wire transfer confirmation. I liquidated everything. My house, my cars, my portfolio. You'll have your $2 million back by end of business today. And then I disappear. Change my name. Maybe start over somewhere nobody knows the Sullivan name. He turned to leave, then stopped. I know you can't forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. But I wanted you to know that when I said you should have been allowed to die, I was really talking about the part of me that needed to die. The part that chose him over you. I didn't forgive him. But I took the box. I should have protected you, he said one last time. Yes, I agreed. You should have. March 27th, 9 a.m. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of Sullivan Medical Group headquarters felt like a courtroom, stark and silent. 8 board members sat around the colossal mahogany table Robert had personally chosen, meant to project power. His empty chair at the head of it was a void. I attended via video link. Marcus had insisted, advising against any physical presence that could be misconstrued as me seeking control. From my laptop, I watched as they systematically dismantled Robert Sullivan's empire. Motion to formally terminate Robert Sullivan as CEO, effective immediately. Sandra Williams' voice was crisp. Seconded, said Dr. Chang. The vote, 8-0. Robert, attempting to join virtually from his lawyer's office, was denied access. Motion to revoke all of Robert Sullivan's signing authorities and board positions. Another 8-0 vote. Motion to appoint Dr. Sarah Martinez as interim CEO for a minimum term of 1 year. 8-0. Dr. Martinez accepted, her face grave. My first act will be to establish an independent ethics committee to review all executive decisions from the past 5 years. Professor Torres raised the next issue. Miss Sullivan, the board would like to offer you the position of Chief Legal Officer with full autonomy to investigate and reform our compliance procedures. I appreciate the offer, I said clearly, my voice carrying through the speakers. But I must decline. Sullivan Medical Group needs to rebuild without any Sullivan family members in leadership positions. The name itself is tainted. Then we should consider rebranding, Sandra Williams suggested. Distance ourselves from the Sullivan name entirely. They would eventually vote to become Commonwealth Health Systems. Robert's name would be scrubbed from every building, every document, every press release. Erased, just like he tried to erase me. There's one more matter, Dr. Martinez said. The trust fund Mr. Sullivan attempted to access, the $15 million. It remains in my mother's trust, untouched, I confirmed. I'll be establishing a foundation for traumatic brain injury research and supporting families dealing with medical malpractice. It will have no connection to this organization. Mitchell Barnes, Robert's former lawyer, had already fled to his car when the FBI arrived. He would later be disbarred for his role in facilitating the attempted guardianship fraud. The meeting ended with a moment of silence. Not for Robert, but for what Sullivan Medical Group could have been if greed hadn't poisoned it from the top. I didn't want his throne, I told them, before disconnecting the call. I wanted my freedom. Today, we both got what we deserved. The board minutes would record it as the shortest executive termination in corporate history. Total time from violation exposure to complete removal, 18 hours. I saw Robert one last time, 3 days after the board meeting. He appeared at my apartment building at 10 p.m., looking like he'd aged a decade in 72 hours. His Armani suit was wrinkled, his perfectly styled silver hair now limp and disheveled. My security guard called to warn me, but I let him in. I wanted to see what remained of the man who tried to kill me. He stood in my living room, his gaze fixed on the photos on my mantel. All of my mother. None of him. I've lost everything, he said, his voice hollow. 7 board positions gone. Personal assets frozen. Barbara filed for divorce this morning. She's taking half of whatever the FBI doesn't seize. Barbara, my stepmother, who'd married him for his money. There was a grim poetry in her abandoning him the moment it all disappeared. The FBI says I'm looking at 20 years, he continued. Insider trading, embezzlement, wire fraud. They haven't decided whether to pursue the attempted murder charge. I said nothing. I let him talk. I wanted him to feel what I'd felt in that coma. Helpless. Voiceless. At the mercy of others. I had debts, he said suddenly. $30 million to people who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse. The merger was supposed to clear everything. Your trust fund was Plan B. So you chose your gambling addiction over your daughter's life. For a moment, his mask cracked completely. I just wanted to protect the legacy. Your mother built something beautiful, and I turned it into something powerful. I thought if I could just get through this crisis, you would have let me die. The words hung between us like a poisoned blade. I was desperate, he whispered. The Russians said they'd kill me if I didn't pay by April. I thought. I convinced myself you wouldn't want to live as a vegetable. That the money would do more good. Stop. I stood up, facing the man who had given me life, and then tried to take it. You weren't thinking about my wishes or the greater good. You were thinking about yourself. You've always only thought about yourself. He aged another year in that moment, his shoulders slumping. The mighty Robert Sullivan reduced to a broken old man in an expensive, wrinkled suit. I know, he said quietly. I know what I am now. I just wanted to protect. No, I cut him off. You wanted to survive. And you were willing to sacrifice me to do it. I walked to the door, opening it wide. Get out. If you contact me again, I'll pursue the attempted murder charges myself. He shuffled toward the door, then stopped, his hand on the frame. I'm sorry, Fiona. Desperation doesn't excuse evil, I said. Even monsters have reasons. That doesn't make them less monstrous. For the first time in 40 years, Robert Sullivan had no title after his name. The $15 million trust fund my mother left me remained untouched. Blood money, my father was willing to kill for. On April 1st, I sat in the conference room of Hartley and Associates, my mother's original law firm, signing the documents that would transform that blood money into hope. The Eleanor Sullivan Foundation for Neurological Recovery, Marcus read from the incorporation papers, dedicated to funding treatment for traumatic brain injury patients whose insurance has denied coverage. My mother's name would live on, but not in the corrupted way Robert had twisted it. $5 million goes to establishing the fund, I explained to the lawyers. $5 million for research grants at Massachusetts General, specifically to Dr. Martinez's neurology department, and $5 million for a legal aid fund helping families fight wrongful DNR orders. And the earnings from the principal? The senior partner asked. Full scholarships for medical students who commit to working in underserved communities. My mother would have wanted that. We structured it so no Sullivan family member could ever control or benefit from the foundation. An independent board of medical ethicists and patient advocates would oversee every dollar. That afternoon, Dr. Martinez called. 3 families have already reached out, she said, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. Their loved ones had DNR orders signed under suspicious circumstances at Sullivan facilities. Your foundation could help them get justice. Then we start with them, I said. James's $2 million arrived as promised, along with a note. This doesn't absolve me. Nothing can. But maybe it can help someone else. I added it to the foundation. By the end of the week, we'd received over 200 applications. Families told their loved ones were too expensive to save. Patients written off because their insurance had caps. People like me, valued in dollars instead of heartbeats. The first grant went to Maria Gonzalez, a 19-year-old college student whose family was told to consider other options after her motorcycle accident. With our funding, she received the experimental treatment her insurance denied. She's walking today. The second went to Thomas Chin, 72, whose children were pressured to sign a DNR because, at his age, quality of life would be minimal. He's now playing piano at his granddaughter's recital. Each success was a repudiation of Robert's cold philosophy. Each recovery was proof that some things matter more than money. My mother's money would heal, not harm. The foundation's motto, now engraved on a plaque in the waiting room of our first clinic, said it all. Every life has value beyond measure. Eleanor Sullivan, 1961 to 2014. By September, I'd established my own practice, Sullivan Legal Services. I kept the name, a constant reminder of why I fight. We specialized in medical malpractice and patient rights, especially cases involving coerced DNR orders and premature end-of-life decisions. My first client? Dorothy Patterson, an 82-year-old whose son tried to invoke power of attorney to stop her cancer treatment and access her pension fund. We won. She's cancer-free today, and her son is serving 3 years for elder abuse. Our office was small, just me, 2 paralegals, and Marcus as senior counsel. But we chose our cases carefully, taking only those where financial motivation had corrupted medical decisions. We didn't chase ambulances. We chased justice. You can make 10 times more in corporate law, a Harvard classmate once told me over coffee. I've seen what corporate law protects, I replied. I'd rather sleep at night. We had one simple rule. We never took cases involving Commonwealth Health Systems, formerly Sullivan Medical Group. They needed to rebuild without any Sullivan shadow, and I needed to build something entirely my own. Dr. Martinez sent updates occasionally. The company had stabilized under her leadership, implementing the strictest ethical guidelines in the industry. Every DNR order now required 3 independent physician agreements and was automatically reviewed by an ethics board. The media attention faded after a few months, replaced by other scandals, other betrayals. But the changes remained. The Massachusetts Medical Ethics Board instituted the Sullivan Protocol, mandatory recording of all DNR discussions, automatic review of any order signed within 72 hours of admission, and criminal penalties for financial coercion. I specialized in protecting the vulnerable from medical predators. My apartment walls began to fill with thank you letters from clients, photographs of recoveries deemed impossible, and one framed document, the Massachusetts State Bar's Award for Excellence in Medical Ethics Advocacy. Robert's name was nowhere in my new life. I'd taken his attempt to erase me, and I'd turned it into purpose. October 2024. The courthouse steps were swarming with reporters as Robert Sullivan was sentenced to 2 years probation for HIPAA violations. Federal prosecutors opted not to pursue attempted murder charges, citing a lack of premeditation, but the civil penalties were crushing: $1.2 million in fines, complete liquidation of assets, and a lifetime ban from any medical board. I wasn't there. I was in court myself that day, winning a $12 million settlement for the Hendricks family, whose daughter had been denied experimental treatment while the hospital's CFO coincidentally bought stock in a competing manufacturer. Sullivan Medical Group, now Commonwealth Health Systems, had recovered to 60% of its pre-scandal valuation. The rebranding was complete. Robert's portrait, once adorning every building, was now gathering dust in a warehouse. James had disappeared after testifying. His cooperation reduced his sentence to 6 months house arrest and 3 years probation. Last I heard, he was an accounting tutor in Portland, under an assumed name, teaching ethical financial practices, ironic penance for his sins. The Sullivan Protocol had been adopted by 3 states, with more considering legislation. 47 suspicious DNR cases were reviewed, leading to 11 criminal prosecutions and 31 civil settlements. Families who'd lost loved ones to financial calculations finally had recourse. The Eleanor Sullivan Foundation had distributed $8 million in grants, funding treatment for 63 patients written off as economically unviable. 58 were still alive. Their families sent us Christmas cards, photos of graduations, weddings, grandchildren, life events that almost never happened. Dr. Martinez invited me to speak at Commonwealth Health's annual ethics symposium. I declined. Some bridges shouldn't be rebuilt, even with the best intentions. The FBI investigation eventually uncovered the full extent of Robert's crimes: $43 million embezzled over 9 years, insider trading netting $6 million, and $2 million in bribes to various officials. The Russian gambling connection led to a separate federal investigation, indicting 6 others in an international money laundering scheme. By every metric, justice had been served. Robert was destroyed. The corrupt system reformed. Victims compensated. So why did I still check my locks 3 times every night? The letter arrived on November 15, 2024. It was forwarded through Marcus' office, bearing a Connecticut postmark. Robert's handwriting, once bold and commanding on billion-dollar contracts, now trembled across cheap notebook paper. Fiona, it began. I know you said no contact, but I need you to know something before I die. The doctors say pancreatic cancer. For months, maybe 6. Ironic, isn't it? All those hospitals I controlled, and none of them can save me now. I've been living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hartford, working as a night janitor at a medical clinic. They don't know who I am. It's peaceful cleaning up after real healers. I think about that ICU room every night. I hear my voice on that recording, let her go. And I understand now what I really was, a father who valued money over his daughter's heartbeat. There's no forgiveness for that. I'm not asking for any. Your mother would be proud of what you've built. The foundation, the practice, the changes you forced onto the industry. You became everything I pretended to be. Powerful, principled, untouchable. I've left what little remains, about $400,000 after the settlements, to your foundation. It won't absolve me, but maybe it can save someone else's daughter. I won't contact you again. I just needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not money or power or reputation. I lost the only thing that actually mattered, my daughter's love. You were right. Desperation doesn't excuse evil. Robert. I read it twice, the flimsy paper shaking slightly in my hands. Then I handed it to Marcus. How do you want to respond? He asked. I pulled out my legal stationery and wrote 3 words. No contact means no contact. Marcus sent it through his office, along with a cease and desist order. 2 weeks later, a $400,000 donation appeared in the Eleanor Sullivan Foundation's account from Anonymous Hartford. I knew exactly who it was from. I accepted it because that money could save lives, but I added a notation in our records: donation accepted without acknowledgement or absolution. Forgiveness doesn't always require reconciliation. Some bridges, once burned by betrayal, should stay ash. Robert would die alone in Connecticut 4 months later. I learned about it from a small obituary in the Hartford Courant that didn't mention his former titles, his medical empire, or his family. Just, Robert Sullivan, 58, janitor. I didn't attend the funeral. Neither did anyone else. 2 days after Robert's death, in March 2025, Marcus called. He'd just received the final FBI document release. The gambling debts, he began, sliding a folder across my desk. They weren't just about money. They were about survival. The Russian mob, he explained, had photographs. Robert at their casino in 2019, 2020, 2021. But then I saw the dates. Each photo coincided with my mother's death anniversary. Every year, on the day she died, Robert flew to Atlantic City and lost millions, trying to feel something other than guilt. There's more, Marcus said quietly. The FBI found his personal journals in a storage unit. He wrote about your mother's death, how he'd pushed her to delay treatment because he was negotiating a hospital acquisition. She waited 3 months. By then, the cancer had metastasized. I stared at the pages of Robert's trembling handwriting, confessing to a guilt that had eaten him alive for 10 years. He'd killed my mother through greed, then nearly killed me for the same reason. He chose his addiction over his daughter's life, I said, repeating my words from months ago. But now I understood. The addiction wasn't gambling. It was trying to escape the crushing guilt of killing the only person who had ever truly loved him. The Russians knew about your mother, Marcus continued. They used it as leverage. Pay us, or we'll tell your daughter what really happened to Eleanor. The final, horrifying piece clicked into place. Robert hadn't just tried to kill me for money. He tried to kill me to keep his secret buried. If I died, the truth about my mother would have died too. He chose his addiction over his daughter's life, I repeated, but this time, the words were different. This time I understood. He'd been addicted to hiding from the truth. Even monsters have reasons. That doesn't make them any less monstrous. I took the journals and the FBI report and locked them in my safe. Someday I might read Robert's full confession. Someday I might even understand how a man could kill the 2 people he claimed to love most. But not today. Today I had a client meeting. A young father, his eyes desperate, whose wife's hospital wanted to discontinue life support because their insurance had lapsed. His wife had an 80% chance of recovery with proper treatment. I would make sure she got it. Because that's what Eleanor Sullivan's daughter does. She saves the people others would let die for money. Thank you for witnessing my story. Sometimes, the greatest betrayals come from those closest to us. But evidence, meticulous preparation, and choosing the right moment can deliver a profound kind of justice. If you've survived family betrayal or navigated the cold, cruel world of medical malpractice, know that you are not alone. Tell me, what would you have done if you discovered your loved one was willing to let you die for money? Leave a comment below. I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to know they can stand up to their oppressors. And always, always remember, document everything.